Move over, Netflix. We've got a live show in a church. Imagine this: a stone cold statue of the Virgin Mary shedding what locals swear are genuine tears. Yes, a tearful statue. Even religious icons can't resist their dramatic meltdown. But Professor Luigi Garcelli, the buzzkill expert, insists these statues are just thirsty. He says the holy figurines are like leaky sponges, absorbing water faster than a dehydrated cactus on a spa day. In a world where even statues can't escape drama, who needs reality TV? Is it divine intervention or just a plumbing issue? One thing's for sure: this tearful Virgin Mary is the holy hot spot of the year. Move over, miracles. There's a new show in town, and it's a bigger cry fest than a soap opera. This story is brought to you from AOL by Amelia Neath on November 15th, 2023. Scott, I'm sure you took a look at this issue. What did you think about this Virgin Mary? You ready to take a trip?
I didn't. I'm not familiar with it. Why do you ask? Oh no, I'm kidding. Of course, yes, I read it. Uh, one of starting at the beginning, right? So they have this statue. It's supposedly crying. People are calling it a miracle, et cetera, et cetera. In the article, they said this: hundreds have flocked to the church to witness the inexplicable miracle take place. And I have a little bit of a beef with that. And this is something that we hear frequently in religious claims, and that it's inexplicable. No, that's different. That's different than unexplained. Okay, so there's a difference between something that we don't know the explanation and we know that it can't have an explanation, or at least can't have an explanation of the things that we know. Despite whatever saying something is inexplicable, there's work to be done there. You have a little bit of homework that you need to do ahead of time if you're going to talk about that. But having said that, it's not all that surprising that people, even in the face of this kind of uncertainty, they don't know what the explanation for this is. They still want to grasp at it. They need to grab at something. The unknown is a very frightening thing, and it's very human too. It's super easy to jump to a quick and easy explanation because, like we said, thinking does require a little bit of effort. And so I was curious, and so I took a little bit of a dive into this on why. I found an article called "Why We're So Terrified of the Unknown," and this was at bbc.com. And they talk a little bit about anxiety and that kind of thing. But here's an important part of that article. It says, in study after study, the researchers found that any element of unpredictability significantly increases people's discomfort. And they would test that by having these experiments where they hook you up to an electric shock. And then for some people, they said, we're going to give you a shock, and then they would shock you. And then for other people, they would say, we're going to flip a coin, and if it comes up heads, we're going to shock you. And if it comes up tails, we're not. And what the researchers found is that participants showed greater stress if there's a 50% chance that they might receive a shock, for example, compared to situations in which there's 100% certainty they will be electrocuted. Okay, so 50-50 shot, people were more nervous about that. And so it's kind of baked into our system, right? Into being a human. Part of being a human is being afraid of the unknown. So at least we can have a grasp on what might motivate people to go down this road. Cross, what's your take on this?
I find that study interesting, so thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
When I read this story, I was reminded of two aspects. There's always a funny and a sad side. The funny part, I was reminded of multiple pieces of pop culture that have done this, right? That this is such a common claim. The statue of Mary is crying, that it's satirized all over the place. I was reminded, if you haven't seen the show Jerry Girls, I highly recommend it. It's about four girls growing up in the 80s in Ireland, and they have an episode where they're praying to Mary to try to pass their exams, and the statue is crying. I won't spoil it, but it's not a miracle. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, another great show, did it in this episode called "The Gang Exploits a Miracle," where there's a stain on the wall and it looks like Mary, and they get people to come and give money and all of that. And I was also reminded of Tim Minchin's poem, which I think is going to your point, the Storm poem, in which he says, "Throughout history, every mystery ever solved has turned out to be not magic." And that goes exactly to your point. It's not inexplicable, it's just not explained yet. So on the funny side, we see these sorts of shows and this sort of treatment, because everybody knows that this is not supernatural. If it were, there would be scientists there. They would be studying it. They would be cordoning off the area, and they might even win a Nobel Prize and change all of mankind if this really were a supernatural event. So I know that all of us don't believe that it's supernatural, and I strongly suspect that a vast majority of religious people, even those who might be going there, suspect it's not supernatural. So that's sort of the funny side. But on the sad side, people continue to exploit alleged miracles for gain. Just a few months ago on my podcast, I did a series on faith healing, and I started with the story you may remember of the church that claimed to have prayed over a woman's amputated foot and grew back her toes. Well, they made a huge claim. It got huge international attention. And as soon as they started getting phone calls, what did they do? They pulled all of their media off social media and stopped answering questions out of concern for the woman's privacy, even though they had paraded around the stage. So people
very
will
thoughtful of them.
Yeah.
people will do this sort of thing either fraudulently or opportunistically. So there's these funny sides and these sad sides. What are your thoughts, Kelley?
It's funny you should say that about fraudulently. I did a deep dive into weeping statues because that's the kind of guy I am. I got really wow, this is a really cool, weird phenomena. I got to check this out some more. And since 1953, there have been 20 highly publicized claims of weeping statues, and surprisingly, the United States has the second largest amount of sightings with 5, but with 6 in Italy. And like I said, I had to take a deep dive into the claims, see what I could find. Not a single one of the weeping statues reported in any of those years was actually found to be a true miracle. One of them was recognized as the Pope as being something. He never actually called it a miracle, but he recognized the statue's existence. Yeah, it wasn't easy to track down, but I found news stories on almost every one of these 20 statues, and most of them were actually confirmed to be a hoax. Many of them were claimed to be weeping blood instead of tears, and every single one that was weeping blood was shown to be a hoax, though not all the perpetrators were found. In one instance, for example, the tears from the Virgin Mary were found to come from a male human who was never found. In another, the blood was traced by DNA to a custodian that actually worked in the church and who was alone in the building at night. So
It's best you not ask.
yeah, right. Yeah, maybe
don't
so, right?
go there. Don't go there.
Most, including the one that was actually recognized by the Pope, were found to be the blood of animals, cows and pigs and chickens, which interestingly, all those animals are easily found on a dinner table. So, they're pretty easy to get blood from one of those. And I think we all heard the rather comical story of the weeping statue of Jesus in India that turned out to be a leaky toilet above the statue. So, I mean,
All I got to say is watch Dairy Girls.
what's really sad about that story is that the guy who actually reported that and figured it out, he was arrested for debunking that statue and was facing 3 years in prison for being
I
a
gotta dig into that.
blasphemer.
Oh my gosh, that is
He had to
amazing.
flee to Finland to avoid going to jail for blasphemy. So that was kind of a sad end to that. Like I
We
said,
could do a whole episode on that, like on Truth
like I
Haunted.
said, I did a big deep dive into this because I thought it was
Yeah.
so weird and cool. But I could sit here and talk all night. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Infidel though before I do.
I think that cross-examiner hit something really important, and that is that there's both sides to it. I mean, there's part of it where you just want to laugh and completely dismiss things because of the sheer absurdity of it and what this points out. God has time to make statues weep, football teams win, and find parking spots. It can show up on toast and a whole other range of things, but it can't really do anything significant. And when we look at that, the worst part is I have no doubt that the local town folk really believe that this is something that's going on. It sounds like they've had some really rough years. I think the last 6 years they've been labeled the most dangerous city in Mexico. I mean, that kind of thing is going to breed a lot of desperation. And well, another thing that we touch on here, and here's the part that's not funny at all, is that religion does have a tendency to take advantage of things like despair or loss. This is the kind of environment that it thrives in. Isn't it heart? We look at it and say, isn't it heartwarming that God has time to make statues weep, but struggle with the whole ending world hunger? These people are looking for something a little more localized. They're looking at the pain and the things that they're dealing with right now, and that's what this is a representative of. And we could say it's in the not no mountains being moved, nothing like that. And it's clearly the witness believe this, and it goes into their credibility, but they're emotionally invested in this because they need a change. They're looking for something to confirm that. But for me, this is about them and whatever voice or reason that's within them to listen to it, because out of all the things that God could do, why tears on a statue? Why would a God seem to be more interested in something that's a parlor trick, that's something that we could replicate? A God that can do anything chooses to do almost nothing. I say almost because, well,
I think you're being a
we
little
are
generous
talking
there.
no, we are talking about tears on a statue. So,
Right.
even giving that,
Hard to
come
argue
on,
with
that's-
hard evidence like that.
yes, that's pretty bad. But but
Well,
what is
unless
this
there's a
God for?
custodian in the church at night alone.
Pretty much good for nothing. And that's all I can say. Scott?
CE, I think you had something
Yeah,
you
wait,
wanted to
oh,
throw out
sure.
there.
Cross-examiner.
Yeah, I
that's
think I can't agree with you more. I mean, two things you said. The parlor tricks parts reminds me of an old joke. I don't know if anybody, I may be aging myself here, but Father Guido Sarducci, a comedian from the 70s, dressed up as a Roman Catholic priest, he had a joke that he would tell. This is a short version of it. He would say, to be made a saint in the Catholic Church, you have to have 4 documented miracles, and only 2 of them can be card tricks. So, that's what we're talking about here. The same thing, this parlor tricks, this cheapness, the making their God seem so small type of thing. But another thing I wanted to pick up on was the sadness, the desperation that you're talking about. And I've been on this kick lately of these little things, and like you said, praying to find my parking spot. And I'm doing an episode on homeopathy and faith healing. All these little things that if people choose to believe them, it primes their brain to believe that there's little bits of evidence of magic throughout the world. And I think that makes you a little more vulnerable. It weakens your bullshit detector a little bit just to have these stories out there. So the headline that this is an inexplicable miracle is contributing to a real problem. Now, I'm, maybe making a mountain out of a molehill here, but I do genuinely believe that when people are inundated with these stories about, homeopathy works and the Loch Ness monster and crying statues, there's a lot of people out there who might be primed to think, magic is real. There, some of this has got to be true. I don't know where to go with this other than to say it's again sad and funny, but we do have to watch out that people don't take it to heart. So thanks for passing it off me, Scott. Did you have something to wrap up with?
No, but I think Kelley does.
I
and
got
that's-
it.
Okay. We keep trying to give it to Scott, and he's
All right,
juking.
Yeah, he's
we'll
just
figure
not.
this
He's
out.
not wanting it.
He's beaming over there.
I was doing my deep dive, and one of the things that I was really surprised about is that this is a phenomenon that goes way back. It was first reported in the first century AD by Plutarch. And I have a great quote here from him. Let me pull it up here because I thought it was a pretty good one. The statues have appeared to sweat and shed tears and exude something like drops of blood. It is not impossible, since wood and stone often contract the mold, which is productive of moisture, and cover themselves with many colors and receive tints from the atmosphere. And there is nothing in the way of believing that the deity uses these phenomena sometimes as signs and portents. And I thought it was funny that here he found this natural explanation for it and still connected that to a god. So I thought that was pretty incredible.
Thousands of years before the Enlightenment and the formalization of the scientific method.
Yep. So I
God
know
used
that
nature.
Scott did do
I do. Yeah, I do. I
did
suppose
have
I
a
have to earn
follow-up
my
though, so that's why we
paycheck
wanted
here a
him to
little bit.
go last. And so what do you got for us,
I
Scott?
do.
on the
I do have a
follow-up?
little bit more to say. I wanted to go last because It's the spoiler, right? So if you don't want the spoiler, and here's your chance to change the channel or whatever. So we're talking about all, people, this unknown thing. We don't have an explanation. We do. We have an explanation. We know what happened with this statue. This is from the Catholic News Agency. They published a fact check on this. The Father Gerardo Lopez Herrera, communications director for the Diocese of Colima, which is where this church was. So this is the person in charge of that area, said a priest went and examined the statue and determined that no miracle was involved. They said that image is a representation of the sorrowful Virgin. The artist placed some silicone tears on it. Okay. It was a piece of artwork intended to look like a woman crying. The parishioners talk about, well, the eyes are red, just like when we're really crying. Yeah, they painted the eyes red. It's the sorrowful Virgin. But there's tears coming up. Yeah, they put tears on there. It's the sorrowful Virgin piece of art. If you look at the different, if you see different photos of it, you'll notice that the tear is always in the same spot, and in both eyes it's coming down. There's no tears flowing. They even showed video of it, and the tears were perfectly motionless. And so I don't know. This is like the worst miracle ever in my book. And that's all I had to say.
Where did this follow-up come from, Scott?
The follow-up was from CatholicNewsAgency.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes.
Totally got to be true.
I mean, how you can't make this up. If you did, like, even It's Always Sunny didn't think that would be a believable storyline, right? And one other note, like, they're doing these fact checks, and Kelley mentioned all these other stories. How many wasted hundreds and thousands of man hours were spent just trying to debunk / verify all of this?
They were
it's
doing
amazing.
DNA tests.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
People with too much free time and too much disposable income, I suppose.
Yep.
And a lot of desperation.
Yeah, that's about it. And people, and why? Why to do it? Why do it? Are they really trying to prove that there's a God, or are they just trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes?
Well, because they would rather have the, they'd rather have the 100% shock than the 50-50 maybe get a shock, right? So they'd rather, it's more comfortable to have this than to think that there's an unknown. Maybe this, we're getting a little meta here. Maybe the whole idea of these statues is to address the unknown of the universe. And they can say, well, if we have these statues, then that shows that we know something about the universe. I don't know. I'm getting a little off track here. So
no, I think you're right. I think you're right.
We know the Catholic Church is nothing more than a criminal syndicate. They operate no other way. So for them to take advantage in a local area of people's gullibility, I have no problem at all that it was.
But they haven't, though.
Well, yeah, they were telling people, they were saying, no, it's not.
The Catholic Church has actually been in almost every one of these cases that I looked at too. It was the Catholic Church that was part of debunking these miracles. So,
and no means yes to some people, and that is
of course.
Fortunately, in this situation,
that's what they have to say.
To keep pushing. Wink. They can't let go of it. They really can't.
Yep, that's it.
Believe strange.
Sorry, I don't. Yeah, it is pretty strange, the whole thing. But what's not strange is you can get a lot of really cool merchandise from the ACA at tiny.cc/ACA merch. And if you want to see more of the nonprofits, all you got to do is click right here.